Chicken and waffles goes well together because of the honey.
See? This is East New York.
On a hamburger. It's okay. Yeah.
I don't put.
I sometimes put mustard on a hamburger, but most of the
Okay. We are ready to reconvene, and we've worked through the first three goals and pillars, and now we'll take up number 4, manage strategically our workforce capacity and resources. Referring to the interview summary, we're on page 2. There was broad agreement on council that this is a challenging goal given the struggles with recruiting, retaining talented employees in this very competitive job market. So there's an acknowledgement and recognition of that. And at the same time, council's also saying that staff has done a good job in the new hires that have been made, the training and professional development opportunities, as well as finalizing labor agreements. A couple more specific items. The upcoming capacity study will be helpful in determining how stretched the workforce is, the departments that are in need of immediate help, and staffing resources needed to deliver service, make improvements, and serve the community. So if you want to talk about the capacity study, need to continue to update and modernize technology to increase efficiencies. When I first started working in Santa Clara, everybody said it was a paper-driven organization, and there's still remnants of a paper-driven organization here. A need to focus on succession planning, ensuring continuity and minimizing the loss of institutional knowledge. And then a very specific item about the possibility of hiring a staff person in the CMO who will specialize in real estate. So let me open this up to council, reactions to any items in the interview, a summary, any overarching comments about accomplishments, what's been challenging over the last year, and what you would like to see staff accomplish in 2020. Little post-lunch resettling here. Councilmember Hardy.
I think this is chewing. Yes, some people are still chewing. It's okay. I think the big struggle here is this is where the reality comes in. This is where, yeah, I was going to say, is this not on it?
Or maybe
Right up to it.
you may be closer.
Close enough. I don't want to eat it.
Rock star, right?
And she is a rock star.
The concern is this is where the reality hits the road. This is where we have to get strategic with what our resources are. And I like to echo everything of how much we appreciate staff, how they come through for us and do so much. And sometimes we recognize we're at capacity. And this is a concern. And when you have such a vibrant job market outside the city, marketing, come work for us, we'll work you to death and pay you less. That's a hard sell. Go figure. And I am appreciative of who we have and the expertise. And I do worry when someone retires that we lose some of that expertise, and the concern that we have policies and procedures in place and methods of operation that are quantified and spelled out so that we don't lose as much of that information and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. Other comments, responses?
Can I add some context?
Please, yes.
I sent this morning the vacancy rate, and I've been more diligent of forwarding the vacancy rate and the report on our recruitment to the City Council. And if you've been able to track it over the last 2 or 3 months, what you'll see is our vacancy rate is going higher. It was at the end of the year, it was roughly about 10%. We're now at 12%, and each time it goes up that 1%, we're talking about a dozen positions. So the issue of managing our resources as well as recruiting and retaining is very important, because the resources available and making sure that we are a employer of choice where people decide to come knowing that they have many choices is a strategic conversation, and we are preparing for a study session as the council requested during the budget process. However, when we look at managing strategically our workforce, I cannot pass up the opportunity of just sharing with you the latest data on public records, because it is a front and center conversation that we have internally and that is always bogging us down. So we are data driven, and obviously Next Request has given us a good opportunity to maintain better and improve data. We have about 372 public records requests reporting for 2019, but we know that not all public records requests are equal. Some come with 2 or 3 pages of request, and so what we track are the sub-requests, so that one PRA document could have 10 different document requests. When we look at that number, we average about 176 requests a week. And that's what we are responding to. Yes, Simrat and Nora were verifying the data. And that total is about 9,200 sub-requests that made up that 372, those different 372 documents. So we are continuing to drown in public records, and as our resources are 1% each time makes it less people available to help with that effort. So I'm happy to send the PowerPoints or the data report that that Nora and Simrat have been tracking for us, but this is very powerful data for us in terms of the reality of what we face with respect to document production.
And, I would just like to dovetail into what Deanna has said, because it's not just simply public records. A lot of times with respect to lawsuits, we get public records act requests that will parallel or precede actual document production requests within the lawsuit. And, since we're at a public meeting, the Niners win the Super Bowl, but the Niners litigation is really burdening, not really so much the city attorney's office, although it is a big chunk of our time to deal with the discovery in that case, but just the records that that litigation is requesting from the city is a big chunk of workload, both for our office as well as the city staff. I just wanted to make that very clear.
Okay, Councilmember Davis.
Moving the microphone closer because I was told I am not loud enough. I find that extremely hard to believe, being a New Yorker and being very loud. Okay. Dr. Spano, I think what's been said here is, it's all true. The impacts that we have, in the last year that have hit the staff, and when I say drive-bys, they have to drop things immediately because things come to the surface. In regards to a workforce capacity and resources, I would really like to have the capacity study again from the outside, because we did do that with police and fire to see where we lost timing or services or people or, I just think that when we have that fresh set of eyes from outside looking in, we've come a long way, but now, some things have risen to the levels of a problem for us. And being council members, we hear a lot of that from the public because we are the elected body. They say, I'm not getting this, or this isn't happening quick enough for me, or, your antiquated systems. Well, yeah, we went through a reform to find out how antiquated and the paper pushing thing that was going on, or things that were not done correctly. And we have gone to great lengths to do all of that work, but that just doesn't happen overnight. There is going to be a process put in place. We have now a procurement. We have risk assessments. We have things that are guiding our decision making. But for me, now we've reached that next level. Let's have the outside capacity study come in, look at where our weaknesses really are. And with limited resources and with limited budgeting Maybe that's the better thing to do so that in a year we don't make the same mistakes or have that perception of us out there that we are a disorganized organization. We've come a long way, and I'm very upset when we hear things like that out in the public, that they think we're not doing a good enough job when we are doing the best to our abilities. And we don't set the government, it's what we do, but we tried the best that we can do as a policy setter to give them the tools that they need and figure out the revenue streams, how we're going to pay for it. But at the same time, when you look at the mainstream that is out there, the city manager cannot control that our economy is booming and we're doing the right thing. So people, the job market is not good for her to recruit or do things. So we have these other mitigating factors that enter into this. So why not go out, have the fresh eyes come in, take a look at what we can do, who we can move around. That's not what we do. That's what Deanna has to deal with. And I think that where are we going to be? What's going to happen? We're growing. We need to get the our city place out of the ground. But the impacts to our staff are amazing. We have lost the institutional knowledge over the years. It hasn't been replaced. Other things have happened where shredding took place and things were missing. So it's like, we're at our ends where how do we handle this? How do we deal with this? So to make an informed decision, they have to have the tools to do the job. So that's my thinking on the workforce capacity and resourcing. So I would really like to have that outside eyes come in and take a hardcore look at us. Instead of reinventing the wheel, maybe somebody already has the wheel invented. So that's thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Chahal, Councilmember Chahal.
Thank you. So that's a very good point to have an outside agency looking at what a workforce stand for. In addition, we have a point like modernized technology, because they can go hand in hand. If we lack in workforce, these are the tools which can make our efficiency much better, and we can basically supplement our workforce shortage, basically. So we have to deep dive into that one too. So which are the departments, which are the technologies we really need to focus on? Because these are the things we control. If we cannot hire a person because of the market conditions and all that stuff, but this is a condition which we fully control if we can budget it out and we can plan it out. And I remember last year we were here with the financial, we have a super good financial package, and we are trying to work out some financial tools to make best use of it. I'm not sure where we stand on that. Mm-hmm. That is a very good example of how we can increase our efficiency. And how we get the information. Everybody on the council or on staff needs some data or the one data or the other. If we have to take piles of papers and do all that research on manually, you can think of how much workforce we need. But if we can modernize the technology and we implement those tools, it would be much easier for us to, and long-term efficiencies and cost as such would be reducing. So I would keep a lot of emphasis on modernizing technology, and specifically I would like to find out what did we do with the financial package we promised last year.
Good. Very good. Who would like to go next? Not that you have to, Professor Gilmore.
Did you just call me professor? Okay.
What? Did I say professor? Okay.
Sit up straight
Well,
now.
I'm Mayor Spano, and we have
Very
Professor
much.
Gilmore over there. We're just doing a little role switch here. Very good.
All right, I'm sitting up straight now. Okay. Okay, so this, I think we all agree that Santa Clara is a unique city, and there's lots of demands on our staff. They change every day. Some are cyclical, depending on what's going on with the world and the economy in terms of the demands. Others are very stable. We know what we have to provide in terms of services to the community. But I think in the last couple of years, the City Council wants to be very sensitive to the staff and the workload and at the same time respond to our community. And I think, I like the words of our city manager, we have a very high-touch community, and I think that's to say the least.
White
Here in
glove.
Santa Clara, we're a large city, but we're still small town in terms of our interactions with our public. And so there's a lot of expectations from our public on things that we need to get done. But we still do see we have that sensitivity to the capacity of our staff. And I think in the last couple of years, we've heard a lot from our staff saying, we don't have the capacity to get this work done. And so we're like, okay. But we can't really quantify what is that capacity. When do we know we're getting close to the capacity? Is there any room above the capacity? We just don't know what that is. And so I think that's when we came up with the idea of just the outside capacity study to look in, so that even when our public says, hey, we want this, and this done, we say, okay, as soon as we hire this number of people, we can get that done because we're going to have room to get that done. So we're not just passing the buck and say, oh, we can't do that now because we don't have the capacity for it. So I think that's one of the reasons, just to educate the council, because if you give us the opportunity, every day, all 6 of us now are going to come up with ideas of programs and issues and everything that we want. I'm sure the staff gets calls all the time about, this one wants that and that one wants that. And then, so we're sort of shooting in the dark a little bit over here. And so I think that is, overall for us, will be helpful. We see, I also see in terms of workforce capacity, I think we need to do a better job of recruiting and really marketing Santa Clara as a great place to work and to have a career in the city. And I know we haven't had a lot of time or capacity to do that, but I think we have to spend efforts into doing that and really marketing us as a stable city, recession friendly, because as we know, the trends are up and down. And I've been a council member when it's down and everybody wanted the government jobs because,
Right.
and it just happens that way. And so to really market us, and we're an interesting city in terms of all the different elements that are involved in the city of Santa Clara compared to other cities. And so I think recruiting is going to be really strategic to help us fill the the positions that we need now and the positions for the future. So I just wanted to say that how important it is to fill the positions we have now. That is so important for us so we can get our work done. But really to find out, what level of employment staffing do we need in the city to meet the challenges?
Excellent. Very good. Yes, Councilmember Watanabe.
Thank you, Sean. So, City Manager, I've got a question for you based on the email that we received this morning, and I know it's not, we just received it this morning, but in the chart that was shared, the one column that shows the number of recruitments in progress by PCN, I forget what PCN stands for, but it looks, is it?
Position control number.
Okay, so does that mean, do those numbers indicate that all those numbers represent people that are being looked at right now or interviewed, or?
Those are the open recruitments. that are
Okay.
underway. And the balance of, there's 138.5 vacancies.
Right.
And 100, just for the public, since.
Yeah.
And 104 3/4 of recruitments of progress for position control numbers. That means that the remaining, we're looking at either the job description, whether it needs to be updated, or making sure that the current vacancy reflects the real work that's needed. It's in a hold status until we determine to go out for recruitment.
Okay. And then, to say we were able to fill, that somebody came forward that was able to fill these, some of the positions anyway. Are these positions that we have like on hold and that there's money allocated in the budget, or is it would be in addition to the budget if they were to be hired?
These positions?
Yes.
So these are all budgeted positions.
Okay.
Just for folks that don't have this, we have 1,150 budgeted positions. And we have a vacancy rate of 12%, which leaves roughly about 139 positions vacant.
Right.
And we are actively recruiting for about 105 positions. They're all budgeted. We do in our budgeting strategy, we do carry a vacancy rate because not all positions are filled at one time, so you can apply a vacancy rate for trends per department. Much more complex conversation, but the money is there. They're ready to be recruited for.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you. That's all I had about that. And then regarding, I mean, I understand the need, to improve modern and update and modernize technology and to increase the efficiencies in these PRA requests. But at the same time, it's not just something that could be done overnight because you can't just, it's not like I'm thinking about when I worked in a law firm, and you just upgrade your system. I mean, with the city, you've got to protect the infrastructure. You got to protect the grid and put all kinds of things in place to make sure that hackers, don't get into your system. So it's not something, unfortunately, that can be done quickly. But at the same time, it definitely would make a difference, in terms of what you're dealing with in the office, in terms of PRAs. Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else would like to go comment on this goal? Please.
Very excited about the capacity study, the results, and bringing that to council. I'd like to request that we consider working through the governance committee because as the council's requesting the study, the scope should really meet before we go out for an RFP, it really should meet your interest. And so I want to work through the governance committee to strike the right balance and update it once the report comes in.
Good. Excellent. Any other comments from council on this one? So I also heard, as the mayor said, council sensitivity to staff's workload, and that came through very clear in the interviews. And the need for succession planning came up. And then I just want to reiterate the capacity study that we've just been talking about, and that I know you've hired a great new HR director. And I know there's work being done on the recruitment side in this tough job market, and that the city continues to work on modernization and technology. And I'm not sure, I'm sensing here that we don't really need to do anything else on this one in terms of any staff answers or information. I think can we move forward on this one? Let's do that. Let's move forward. Are we good? Okay. Oh, yes, please.
I only needed the status of what we did for the financial package because that was a big one last year.
On
Where we stand on that.
On the modernization.
Yes.
Can report that out tomorrow. It's part of the budget.
Okay, so let's make a note of that. Very good. And tomorrow. Excellent. Yeah, very good. Okay, so that moves us on to number 5, enhance community engagement and transparency. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, that surfaced, I think, in all the interviews that I conducted. It's very top of mind for council. And so going to the interview summary, it's top of mind for council, not because you're not happy or pleased or satisfied with the progress that's being made. There's just so much going on out there with social media and all the available communication channels out there. Is the city falling behind? Are we not getting our message out? How are we doing countering misinformation? So that was a real concern for you all, but you did note that you're happy and pleased with the progress that's being made, especially around transparency. A couple items that surfaced there was the website improvements, the CMO communications, blogs, community letters. There were a couple other additional suggestions for enhancing transparency. Let's put those on the table here, provide an annual update on the number, status, and cost of the lawsuits against the city. And City Attorney Doyle might want to comment on that. Monitor single source contracts and ensure that important finance-based decisions are included as regular agenda items, not on the consent calendar. So we can take up those issues in the discussion to follow. In terms of the community engagement piece, there is clear agreement that you would like to see improvements made in engaging the community on the city's goals and priorities, constraints and challenges, and successes and accomplishments. And so some of the suggestions for enhancing community engagement, we can share those with the consulting firms tomorrow, making information more accessible, bullet points, visuals, avoiding lengthy text-based messages, utilizing technology, collaborative type software, and going outside of City Hall, engaging with community groups, engaging with individuals at their location as opposed to them coming to City Hall. You all are looking forward to hearing from the consulting firms tomorrow, so we have threefold will be here tomorrow and Circle Point will be here tomorrow. My understanding is they'll have brief presentations for you and then lots of time for Q&A and discussion with them. And then there was, and I wasn't sure where to put this, but I put this under community engagement, a request to reinstitute the International Exchange Commission as another transparency. Yes, that was from Council Member. Yes, that was from Council Member Davis. Very good. So thoughts, reactions about community engagement, messaging, and recognizing that we have time set aside for this tomorrow, but there's no reason why we can't discuss it here today. Councilmember Hardy.
I have just very quick. First, I'd love to hear from our city attorney if there's some way to let our public know kind of what we are spending in a general way, and I'll let him answer that. Also, we have worked really hard on simplifying our minutes for our different commissions and making that very, very clear. I like that we've added now our strategic goals on that. My one thought is in our council, in the staff report, there's always a fiscal impact. And I'm wondering if that wouldn't be a good thing to add to that line item so our public recognizes what our fiscal impacts are to certain, to different council actions, because I think there's a misnomer, first off, that we have some money tree we're shaking somewhere and that we can do anything.
Yeah.
And understanding that sometimes it's one thing for another thing, that we're going to have to give on one thing and make some decisions. And I just want to be a little more clear also the fact that so many people think we make money on housing being built in the city, which is a misnomer I have tried to battle quite a bit. Thank you.
Very good. Brian, you want to?
Sure, and I understand the interest of the public in that kind of information, and I think there may be ways I can come up with general categories of expenditures that we're dealing with in terms of my biggest concern is actually the litigation, because if people know how much you're spending on the litigation, that could be a strategic element of whether they want to settle with you or not, or whether they want to make a proposal. But I think I can work with Ken and we can come up with some general numbers about certain types of litigation perhaps, and so we'll bring that forward. I guess the context of how I would bring that forward might be maybe within the budget process. I'm not sure what the best way to do that, but I definitely will respond to that request.
Very good. Okay, other comments on this? Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you. So I just wanted to, in terms of community engagement and participation, I do support making sure that we have really strong efforts in that area. And Alex Shore from Catalyze SV, mentioned some of those ways. And back even when I was on the Planning Commission and I would go to conferences and I could see a lot of the technology that was being developed about interactive participation. We use, even with like the development of the bike plan, there was more chance for people to weigh in and some of the comments about, now that we have things like Facebook Live and things like that where people could maybe send in comments to a meeting, and I've
long been interested in some of the deliberative democracy approaches on maybe on specific topics. I know Stanford has done a lot of work in that area, so I'm very supportive of us continuing to do those kinds of exercises, whether in person or remotely with the members of our community, and recognizing that it's particularly with the working hours people have and the transportation situation, can be very difficult for people to be there in person. And the other thing, I want to make sure that we are putting the right attention to enforcing it. We started the lobbyist ordinance, and then we've had the dark money ordinance. And I think that those were real step forwards in addition to having our campaign ordinance, which when I tell people in the surrounding communities, some of the restrictions that we have in Santa Clara, they're like, oh, well, like you can't start campaigning until a certain time, or you can't just keep a bank account open, and you have a limit on the money that you're going to, in most cases, that you're going to be allowed to solicit and, those kinds of things. So I think that that's really important that we did the work to get those ordinances, and I know City Clerk Hagag has been working on that, but if we need to have a little bit extra to make sure that on the national stage, you were hearing a lot about the integrity of elections, to make sure that we can state very sincerely to our public that our elections are as secure, and everybody has a right to speak and share their opinion, but that there aren't people that are having an unfair advantage in how they're putting out their messaging.
Very good. Great. Yes.
I would like to highlight 2 points over here. We have a monitor single source contracts. I've seen we are doing quite a lot of those single source contracts, so it's okay to do those, but for transparency purposes, I would like to have a very valid reasons why we are doing, complete valid reasons. And now that we have a procurement department, so all these contracts should have a stamp from them. Yes, there is a valid reason for doing this single source, and they should be on board when we do those. That's very important to me, because we are using public funds for all these contracts, and it should be very transparent. And next is the finance-based decisions included in regular agenda items. The reason I am requesting this thing is because there are hundreds and thousands of dollars contract we do, and I would say if we are doing those, we need a report what happened in the past on those contracts and how we are on the table, why those contracts are being brought up. We can put a limit on that, more than 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is. But if it is a cumulative contract which has gone multiple times, I would not like it to be on constant calendar. The staff should be reporting on that. This is what this contract was for. This is renewed 2 times or 3 times or 1 time, and why it is renewed, and so that we get the visibility of what actual contracts are, and also justification of spending the public money on that. Good. So that's very important to me. Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Anything else on this item here? Yeah.
Thanks. I want to follow up on a couple of things. One, I think overall, our community engagement, we're really trying. We're trying things out, and we're trying to do the best we can to engage the community. We're trying to make things as open and transparent as possible, especially for public records requests. But we do have people that public records request us that are doing so, as more of a harassment. Others are very legitimate. So the more information we can put online, so everybody that wants information, they don't actually have to submit one, they can see that it's there, I think the better. So I think we're on our way to doing a really good job. Santa Clara is getting a lot more requests compared to any of our surrounding cities. So the fact that we have to dedicate resources to this versus, other programs in our city is really, it's terrible, but we have to do it. So hopefully, and it is an election year, so it's probably going to increase dramatically. And I think that we need to be aware of that. And to follow up with what Councilmember O'Neill said, it's important that we have a clean election. And several, in the last couple of times, we've had dark money
Blue PAC and other type of groups that came and, to take over the election. We don't even, to this day, don't know who has paid for that. So I suspect there's going to be others that rear their heads. And so I think we have to pay particular attention to having clean elections in Santa Clara because we demand that. And I know our city clerk's going to be very busy as well. And another thing is we have these ordinances and we need to enforce them. We're the first to have the dark money ordinance, and I think, we might be firing it up this year. So I think that, we need to keep our eagle eyes out there and to make sure that Santa Clara elections are not compromised for our residents and they're fair, open, and clean. And I think that's going to need to happen in at least 2020. And I'm sure some extra resources are going to have to go towards keeping our elections clean in Santa Clara.
I just wanted to chime in and on a couple of things. The first one, which, as Mayor Gilmore just mentioned, the resourcing is going to be something that will come back, and I'm sure the council will support because this is a very important thing. We have the ordinances in place, and we just need to enforce it. We already have, as I've mentioned in the last couple council meetings, an incident right now that we're dealing with, even for the upcoming March election, of what we believe may be a violation of the dark money ordinance with failure to disclose certain campaign activity. So certainly this is an opportunity for us to kind of put it into action and if we need some assistance from the council in terms of resourcing, which I don't think is going to be an issue, but we'll certainly come for that. The other item that I wanted to discuss on this issue, and it addresses the very specific bullet that was referenced by Sean about just how we do better engagement and the tools that we have, making things more accessible to the community, and going outside of City Hall to engage with them where they are rather than expecting them to come to us. And I will be bringing a proposal to the council very shortly, hopefully to schedule on the next council meeting on February 11th for an activity that I think all of you as council members would enjoy, and I'm sure the community will love, which is monthly town hall meetings that would rotate through the different districts. So I will bring that proposal forward. It will certainly require some sort of staffing and funding to do those sorts of monthly town halls and also make it accessible and live stream to the public. But it also need your commitment as council members to attend and actively participate and encourage the residents within your districts to show up to your town halls. So we're very fortunate in our area to have at least, to see a Congress member who holds town halls, which is unusual or it is unique throughout the whole country for somebody to hold town halls like this. And I think it's a great model for us to even apply to the city, to our council members, especially now that we have districts and, that council members represent the members, not just the whole city, but to also answer and give an opportunity for the members of their district to reach out and have their voices heard. So I'll be bringing that, and I think it will directly address this, and I'm certain the consultants tomorrow will have more to say about community engagement.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much, Hassan. That's wonderful to hear. As I was preparing for this, the goal setting, I went out and I met with the residents. I reached out to the HOAs that I was aware of, and fortunately, a good number of them were available. And I went out and I talked to them. And when I finished, I thought, maybe I could do this, on an annual basis or biannual basis, just to connect and hear the questions. And because it's a way to keep the misinformation at a level that doesn't rise, and just let people know, keep them in check of what's going on in the city. I know, I'm on social media quite a bit, and I see comments every once in a while that just glare at me, and I think to myself, I can't let this go. And so I will, in a thoughtful way, just try and respond to the whatever I read, and just set people straight. And if I can use the backup information to justify what I'm sharing, because I think it's important. The people, they need to know that they can trust their city leaders, and not just because of what you say, but because you have something to reference it. And so I think, the city has done a great job. I know I mentioned before, that we, there's maybe another level that we can reach out to. And I think what you're just sharing right now is a way to be able to do that and keep the communication open. And so people aren't having these ideas, that we're lining our pockets with gold and all kinds of other things. So that's great. I look forward to
You
hearing.
told me. But I certainly want to echo what you're saying about making it easy, just making yourself accessible to people, to the constituents, I think is a huge. It speaks volumes, right? When residents can see that their council member is responding to a post that they've made on social media, I mean, I think it is a huge benefit. And like I said, it's meeting people where they are rather than expecting them to come, to us. And I think, whatever programs we can do, whether it's the town hall or, more of what you suggested about, just reaching out to people on social media and addressing questions, concerns. I see your posts certainly all over the place on social media, and it's great. And quite frankly, the folks who raise concerns, who make some of those comments that seem absurd to us, are not doing it with any ill intent. I think it's just misinformation, and I don't think there's any scenario where over-communication to the residents is ever a bad thing. So we should find all of those avenues to over-communicate, and I think it's one thing to have communication come from from city staff or the city manager's blog posts, which are amazing, but it's another one to have it come from the elected representatives, right? Because the people chose us as their elected representatives, and so I think there's different aspects, and both should be utilized, and we should facilitate both of them as much as we can.
Yes. I would like to second that, and you're right. Like our engagement from asking residents to be in a city hall are very few. But if we go to them, whenever I have gone there, I have learned so much from them. And actually, the same idea I floated last year at the same meeting, that we should hold annual monthly, and this staff mentioned that there are some concerns about the funding and other stuff. So we should, if the funding is available, this is a great idea, and this will give us a real grassroots level of feedback from our residents. And I'm all for that. All for that. Thank you.
Yes.
I needed to piggyback on what Teresa O'Neill said about the dark money and perception. But the other thing that comes to mind is the enforcement of the lobbyist ordinance and the fact that when we put out the calendaring of what we do, and some people don't fill in their calendars, I guess, the way they should, and that's come to our attention. But also, the lobbyist is not being enforced the way that it should be, because there are people that seem to skate around that a little bit, and who they are, who they're working for, what's happening. And, we're dealing with some of that stuff right now. But at the same time, maybe we need to, under transparency, we introduce these dark monies, lobbyists, and calendaring. So maybe we need to have a little penalty that goes along with enforcement on that issue, because some people just seem to think that we don't need to do that. But that was all something that we kind of worked on as an organization with ethics and governance, and to bring that to light, because some of the misperceptions out there were duly noted as some kind of conspiracy thing. And so we really need to be a little bit more diligent, I think, in that area, just to make the community a little bit more aware. We are doing what we can do, but having misinformation out there is, or trying to have that perception changed by certain people to discredit what's going on. And and we read about it a lot, and it's in poor taste, bad journalism, whatever you want to call it, but it's one of those things that I think we have to work on. And I don't know if that goes through Hussam or the city attorney's office, but when we implemented these things, we were hoping that we would have the staff necessity to, handle what was going to happen to us. And like the mayor said, we're back into an election year, and public records requests are going to, be heightened. And do we have the staff capacity to take on these things, warranted or not warranted? So there are things that impact us that, like I said, I call them drive-bys. But when they happen, we need to be able to handle all of that. And do we have to build that into our budget also for enforcement, especially on these election years? And also cleaning up, I think Hussam would have to do this, alluding to the districts. We don't need to raise that much money anymore to run an election. So I think there are things that we need to clean up and tighten up within our election laws, and I guess we can do that later. But that's something that I think we need to address because it's a lot smaller of a district to deal with.
Sean, if I may. I do want to piggyback off of one thing you mentioned about the drive-bys. One thing that we should all be aware of is that this is an election year, but we have election years every other year. It's not every 4 years, right? So dealing with the drive-bys in a reactive way, I think, is not a scalable solution. And I think we should seriously think about whether, like you said, it's increased more permanent staffing or like some sort of arrangement that we have to to just always have this available and deal with it as it comes, rather and be proactive about it rather than being reactive and just scrambling every other year to figure it out. I think is something that we should consider as a priority for the city.
Good. Other comments? Couple big themes that came through, what we're just talking about in terms of your campaign-related ordinances, dark money, lobbyist, campaign ordinances, the need to make sure the public knows that, the public communication piece of that, and then the enforcement piece of that. And there might be some opportunities to do a little cleanup about some other election-related ordinances and laws. Also hearing the need to make sure on the transparency side that as much information as legally permissible and appropriate is available to the public. Documents, information, and that this might also reduce workload if community can get that directly without having to go through staff. And that also includes using technology for community engagement, as Councilmember O'Neill said, collaborative type software. Also, the city attorney will work with the finance director in terms of getting you information about legal costs, lawsuits, and all within ways that don't jeopardize the integrity of the office and the work that they do. And then just in terms of the single source contracts and the consent calendar, important to provide reasons, context, and background information around that. So that is also part of the transparency, and that you can also get approval from procurement around that as well. The town hall proposal coming before you, and all of this takes on even a heightened relevancy given that this is an election year. Anything else to add? Anything else any missing pieces here? We good to move forward on this? Okay, so we'll look forward to our presentation and discussion with 3 Point and Circle Point. We'll continue that conversation tomorrow. Let's just move forward here onto item number 6, ensure compliance with Measure J and manage Levi Stadium. Broad agreement on council, I'm working from this summary, broad agreement on council that this goal is taking and using the term extraordinary amount of staff's time, limited time and energy, and that's this city manager's office, but it also cycles out to the departments as well. The city or stadium authority should work with the management company whose interest is to increase revenue generation on non-NFL events. There was a real consensus around that on council as well. And providing an update on action items that were developed from the Levi Stadium Community Outreach Engagement Project a couple years ago with the Lou Edwards Group and the Public Dialogue Consortium. Where are those recommendations? And then also considering exploring pathways that result in improved performance and outcomes between the city, the community, and the 49ers. So any reactions to those, other items to put on the table, other aspects that are important to you around goal number 6, pillar number 6? Yes, Councilmember O'Neill.
Well, I would just say that, I mean, I know we've had a couple of attempts to try to get the community room, which to me isn't as high a priority. I would like to see, you know, like at some point, you know, I think envisioned that the stadium the stadium itself would be available for, you know, large scale community events. And maybe we look at that. I don't think we ever had the Santa Clara days that we were supposed to have when the stadium opened. You know, like, you know, just look at maybe there would be, like, I know Mary mentioned Vanguard. I mean, you know, I know we've had a couple high school football games there, but maybe there's something to do, something like, if at a reasonable rate, a Vanguard wanted to, or have a really large, you know, competition, field competition, or something like that. I mean, I do think that the public thought that the city was going to be able to use the stadium occasionally for certain, you know, maybe like a big 4th of July, you know, fireworks show or something like that. So, you know, that has not really come to pass. Perhaps, you know, if we, you know, when we're successful at possibly having another group manage for the non-NFL events, that could happen then. But I don't want us to lose track that you know, that it is a community asset.
Excellent, very good. Other items around Measure J Levi Stadium, Councilmember Hardy?
Well, it's no secret around town that I was one of the ones lobbying against this because I had certain concerns. And unfortunately, some of my concerns have come to fruition. And it's no fun being right. I heard very clearly from the survey that the city did that the residents of the north side were not as worried about the noise from the stadium as they were from the airport. And if it really is the reason of the curfew that we're not getting some of the non-NFL events that could be money makers, because we've had plenty of those that aren't, I would love to just revisit the curfew in a temporary way and see, and then we would have more information to see, does this really make a difference? 2 events, 4 events, something like that, so that we could see, was that the problem or wasn't it? I'm also really frustrated, and I don't know, it's part of our messaging as well. When they show the stadium for any events, NFL or whatever, they show places all over the Bay Area, and they don't show anything from Santa Clara, and that except for the actual stadium, which is frustrating to me. And we have, I have someone else that agrees with me. So we have just polished up our statue, our Santa Clara statue, which to me is an iconic visual of what Santa Clara is, but it's very frustrating to see things from Oakland be shown as Santa Clara when we own the stadium and it looks like we don't, or that we're now right next to the Golden Gate Bridge. Thank you.
Yes, council member.
So I'm the other council member probably who didn't support Measure J, and I have the same feelings. Like if you look at the curfew part of it, like there's so many things going on, but there are some simple things which I think can make non-NFL event revenue coming back to the city. And one of that is the curfew thing. Like we did that detailed survey and the results were very clear. The close vicinity residents were not so much impacted by that. And it's the survey which shows that. It's not, I am not saying that. So we should be very clear about that. Okay, these are the number of days we will allow you for extended hour shows or something. And whatever other litigations and things are going on, they can keep going. Right? But we can still, while this is going on, we can make this thing clear that we have to give them a clarity of that, because ultimately we are losing revenue for the general fund. If these events can happen now that stadium is here, at least we get that revenue. And if they are just taking that stand, oh, these events are not happening because of the curfew and all that stuff, at least we take out that excuse from that, that, okay, this is an excuse or something. We can take out that excuse. Now, let's see the revenue on that.
Very good. Excellent. Good. Other comments, thoughts, reactions?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad that you have the Blue Edwards study on here. And I can't believe we did it back in 2017, 18. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But I definitely would like to get an update and revisit the study that was done. My recollection, and again, we're talking almost 3 years ago, is that the community response to the noise was like 50-50. And it wasn't specifically that there was a large majority of people that felt that lifting the curfew was appropriate. And I, that's my district. And so I hear, I see, I talk to people, and I know that there is a big concern. There is still a big concern about noise. I mean, just with the recent playoffs, there was a big issue surrounding noise. And with the flyovers that changed all of a sudden. And people weren't expecting it, and it's not fair to the residents. I mean, they were there first, and promises were made to those residents, and we need to keep those promises, which is why we did the study. The other thing I would like to add to that is the fact that regarding the non-NFL events, we've recently received messages or emails about 2 different concerts coming up on Saturdays and Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. So it's possible that these events can be held on a day and a time when it's not going to have an impact, an overall impact, as much as an impact to the neighborhoods as it would if they were held during the week. And which is one of the reasons why we need to look at a management company that will listen to the city and the requests and honor the curfew ordinance that was made as a result of the residents and a condition of approval for the stadium. So I have concerns about the curfew. I have concerns about the noise. I think the North Santa Clara is probably one of the most impacted communities when it comes to noise. I mean, talk about planes, trains, and automobiles. Those people have to listen to that every single day. And I hear it myself. So, I think it would be good to revisit the Lou Edwards report that was done, and at the same time take it all into consideration before we reaching out to the community before we consider making any changes. Thank you.
Are there other responses, reactions? Jump in, and then we'll go to Mayor Gilmore.
Yeah, just specifically addressing Vice Mayor Hardy, your comment about there was a big if at the beginning of your sentence, which was if it is true that the curfew is impacting the ability of the stadium manager to generate revenue, and that is a big if. And there's a lot of factors involved with that. And unfortunately, that's become kind of an element of the litigation that the 49ers filed against us regarding the termination of the management agreement. So I would more than happy to cover the curfew issue in a public session where the public has a way to weigh in on that. I think there's a lot of factors that point to the fact that the curfew really doesn't affect the ability to earn revenue. But I would like a chance to have a closed session on the litigation before you embark on a public discussion of the curfew, just so you're aware of the impact of what could be said during that session and how that might affect the city's lawsuit.
Good. Reactions to that before we go to Mayor Gilmore in terms of a study session? Does that make sense? And we're not going to decide now, but just take it.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I was just going to talk about
Please.
this issue and including the curfew.
Please.
So I agree that we should look at go back and look at the Lou Edwards study group, the group study, because it talked about, and I don't know, I'm hearing people say the statistics were clear. No, they're not clear, because the North Side community especially had a lot of concerns. It was noise, it was nuisances, it was parking, it was a whole group of concerns. And what I remember about that study was that impacts their neighborhood, but that the rest of the city, although they're not impacted by the noise and the parking and stuff, but had sympathy towards the North Side.
Yes.
And so I thought that was, indicative of our community and how we support each other in the different neighborhoods, support each other. So there was a lot of information it was just a bundle of nuisances that we, over the years have, especially Councilmember Watanabe now that's her district, is trying to make stable. So with each event, like we have, the police department is now doing a really good job of trying to protect neighborhoods and other things. So through all the NFL games this year, we had a better protection in neighborhoods. It's not perfect. We still, we have a long way to go, but we're on the right track in terms of managing all that. But I think that in terms of upcoming 2020, one thing we really need to start looking at is the parking situations, because a lot of the parking lots that are used now could potentially be developed. So, that will then further impact the neighborhood. And we should be talking about that, because as the 49ers continue to win, more people will come and more cars. So we have to have that conversation. Okay, good. It's on Kathy's goal setting. But in terms of the curfew, the city manager, stadium executive director, has presented to us the information, at least that we had from our finance department, where we make money on the non-NFL events and where we don't. And it was clear that we make money on certain concerts. We've made money. Where we're losing millions of dollars is the non-NFL football events that they have managed, and that's part of our issues. So it's not the concert situation, it's the other. And as this morning, as I was online buying tickets to Justin Bieber for my daughter that's coming to Levi Stadium it's not for me, on a Friday night per se, right? It's on a Friday night, and then we have somebody else coming the K-pop, right? That's coming on Saturday. Those are great. Those are wonderful concerts. They'll fill up and it'll be good for us. It is possible. But one thing that concerns me very much is that there was a recent poll going around, and I know we're trying to get the source of the who's paying for that through our dark money research. One of the questions was in the poll from one of the neighbors was, would you support changing the weekday curfew to midnight and the weekend curfew to 2 a.m.? So, that's kind of what's being floated out there right now. So we have to be very careful about what we do. That was a compromise and a condition of development to satisfy the neighborhood at the time. I was there at the time. I heard all the promises to the neighborhood, and that was one of the reasons, the neighborhood and the vote was to support the stadium. So just changing it because you're listening to narrative out there that it's the concerts that are if we can't have concerts, then we're losing. That's not true. So I respect the city attorney, stadium authority attorney, that we're going to take this and talk about it, but it's not something you change overnight without community involvement. So I think going back to that study, looking at what it said, maybe updating it, and then moving on some of that is important. The rest of the stadium authority, what do we have? 7, 8 lawsuits. 7. They've sued us 7 or 8 times. We're in court, and the court's going to settle that in terms of the management of the stadium. But when we actually get professional management of the stadium, I think that we'll see some things turned around and having community events. I know we're going to look at opening the Creek Trail. That's important. That was promised. Community events and having more public use of our public stadium. So a lot of that is in the hands of the court, and it may not be this year. Who knows when it'll be. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good. Yes.
So I guess it was no big secret that I was a proponent of having the stadium here because I thought it would be good for the city of Santa Clara. But unbeknownst to me and a season ticket holder, along with my council member over here, created some issues that we heard for people that are in the stadium, what's going on in the parking lots, the fact that part of one of the agreements that we had was a marketing pro forma that we never saw. And they were to work with our Chamber of Commerce, and they were to work with the TID, and they're supposed to be working with the convention center to enhance what was out there, that they were going to do all of this. These were all promises that we heard, yeah, we're working on it. And I did have one meeting with our economic developer, Wichita, and Jimmy Carriel, and we talked about the marketing plan and how it would be more effective and what it would bring for the community benefits, because we do own it and they are renting it. So it's kind of like, how do you enhance, our quality of life out there? And Jimmy Curio just made me laugh when he said, well, what are you looking for? And I kind of threw out ideas of what would work, but you have to, again, have community engagement, have conversations with the people that are all there, all the stakeholders involved in that conversation. And it just seemed to not go in that direction. But again, also part of one of their agreements that said they would supply that information to us, which went nowhere. Then when it came to the money situation, and once again, we are getting zero money this year, I just find it funny that they're one of the 32 teams, but a high-rated team as far as money and economics. So how is it that we don't get any money and they're getting all of this money? So I'm just kind of confused on how that all works out. For Ken to come to me and say, well, Deb, we have this much information and they give us this so that we have like partial analysis. Again, as a policymaker, how do you make a decision when you don't have all the facts? So that becomes a hindrance for us. But then everything seems to be played out in the narrative, out in the media, versus what happens on the inside of our council. So the management is very important to us because we want to be fiscally responsible. We want to be able to manage and pay down debt. We need to do a lot of different things. But at the same time, we're just looking for some kind of compliance with them to say, we're a good working partner. Second, when we bring up that curfew, and that's not us, that's them, that's their narrative saying, this isn't working and you got to get rid of the curfew because you're creating a problem for us. I don't see it that way because they have never, the birth of the proof of burden is theirs, not ours, because we're not promoters. We have to go on what they tell us or have a professional person tell us because, again, we make the decisions. So the other problem that we have is if we knew what that curfew was like, but they agreed to that in a contract again in 2010 under our laws of a curfew, and they agreed to that. So why is that all of a sudden a problem for us? I'm confused about that. So thank you. Am I going to get louder now? I'm going to get louder now. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
So to me, it's like, come to the table with us, stop what you're doing out there, because there are people that come to me and say, how are we going to work this all out without having another lawsuit thrown on us and more staff time? But how do we work this out? And it just seems like they don't want to talk about it because they think that they're right, and then we're trying to protect our city. So how do we do that? And there are the TID people, and there are people that live out in that area. They would love if we had that conversation open, but I guess we have to have people in the room to referee. So I don't know what the real deal is. We have meetings, they don't show up. They say they're going to show up. So how can we really engage in what's happening? So we've had to resort to some crazy things of, trying to take back the management agreement because it seems like they don't know how to manage. So how do we do all that? So I think that's a big headache that I see. I don't hate the team. I love the team. Go Niners. I hope you win. But at the same time, it's like we have to be responsible as policymakers to run the stadium, to be and do our due diligence. And it just makes it really hard when it's adversarial all the time. And I'm hoping that this will have some kind of conclusion in the next year, and that we can get some good advice or figure out how to run the stadium professionally, and figure out the non-NFL monies and the gains, and take care of our seniors and our schools and the things that they promise to us, and also work with our other partners out there, the convention center and those other people. So it's not just the city that seems to be losing, it's the people in the whole neighborhood. So yes, we need to go back to that study that was done and revisit some of the options and see what's happening. I also feel that maybe we need some outside eyes on this one again to look in from what's really happening, because we're letting judges decide what to do. So I don't know. I mean, I just think that it was going to be a viable thing for the city of Santa Clara, and it just didn't turn out to be that way. And we are in year 5, I think now. Their season ends, and then we start up again in April. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to have some kind of something. I don't know what that answer is going to be, but I just think that this has been one of our goals, one of our pillars, but at the same time, it's the hardest one that we've ever had to deal with in our lives here. It takes the staff time alone amazes me. And I think that was also something in the management agreement where we had a separate fiscal manager and attorney or whatever. So maybe we really need to revisit what's there and see how, and we do have an office over there that we could utilize. As Councilmember O'Neill brought up, the community room was supposed to, the Santa Clara Day. I mean, these were all things that our people, the ones that didn't want Measure J and the people that did want Measure J, to come together to bring the city back together on this, but not spend our general fund money at all. But it has, like I said, when we reach these limits that kind of go a little bit higher than what we can deal with, I think that we really need to look at how we can handle some of this work. So that's my words. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Other comments, reactions, questions? Yes.
I would just like to add that I think our focus as of now should be to how we can stop the non-profitable events, non-NFL, non-profitable events.
Yeah.
That's, if we can do that one way or the other, I think we can be at least profitable on the non-NFL events.
Good. And ensuring revenue for non-NFL events, right? I'm hearing that come through, and that came through in the interviews. The other thing that I'm hearing is the management agreement with the new management company. That's another high priority within this goal and pillar. Does that resonate with council?
It's already legal, so.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Well, and things that we have discovered in bringing the stadium operations into compliance with law, in terms of the following the California state law for procurement and
Right.
not conducting employment, no wage theft, those kinds of things. Yes.
Good. So legal compliance, good. Okay. Anything else?
I wanted to add.
Oh, please.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that this year already we have out for procurement to audit the CFP assignment agreement. If you recall, there was an audit clause in that agreement, as well as the construction fund. So we will be working on those this year and bring information back. We also are in the process right now of working on the budget. We'll be back with the budget. The budget does include the process of a marketing plan, so I'd like to take Councilmember Shahal's request on non-NFL events that are profitable to the management company, because the burden of revenue generating events is not on the board or the stadium authority staff, but rather the management company, and so we have no influence on the non-NFL events. It's their quality of contract provisions, and I know the mayor at the last meeting read some of those out, as well as their ability to secure events. I want to touch on one item that we'll spend a lot of time on this year, and it falls in the category of managing Levi Stadium. I did send a letter to the city council yesterday. The management company submitted a letter to an email and an attachment to me in December disclosing the contracts that they had executed before the November 8th date, which was the date where their procurement authority was amended. In our quick review of the contracts that they executed, it's just a matrix. There were already some violations with the procurement, as well as absence of dates, violations in terms of the budget authority. They were proposing to have executed contracts for budget that yet had not been approved by the board. And so we did send them that letter. They'll have to make decisions in terms of how that impacts their management of Levi Stadium, because once again, it showed their inability to properly procure and execute contracts. And so they do have that information now where they can go ahead and put the corrective action in place.
Okay, anything else around this item here, this goal? So again, stepping away from the discussion, summarizing the revenue on non-NFL events, the management company, also high priority, and as the mayor just mentioned, ensuring that you are complying with law and that you're in legal compliance comes into play as well. And then, and not losing sight of the closed session on stadium litigation, which I'm understanding from City Attorney Doyle is very important to establish a foundation for where you can be advocating and not advocating, and what's appropriate and permissible, legally permissible. So if there's nothing else, we can move on to number 7. And let me just check in. Do we need a break? We ready to go through number 7? We ready to tackle number 7? I'm seeing going through. Excellent. Very good. What's that? The cookie kicked in. Excellent. Very good. Okay, so we are on to your sustainability goal. Some people, it's coffee. Other, it's cookie, right? Sugar. This could go viral. The cookie kicked in, right? And we all know what that means. And plumbing too. Two today, Councilmember Davis. Okay. Sustainability, your newest goal pillar, was put on in 2019. And the first thing that I noticed looking at your list is you've got action-oriented verbs leading into sentences, and then you have a single word for sustainability. And that, I think, relates into the first item here on the interview summary. Most of you think about and approach this goal from the lens of this is environmental sustainability, but it's not uniform. And if you look at sustainability, that term can get some pretty broad parameters. Is it economic sustainability? Is it workforce sustainability? So it branches off into other areas. So maybe the first thing to do is to affirm with council that you are thinking about environmental sustainability when you put this goal up. And that might seem obvious, but let's affirm that. There was also a little bit different perspective on council in terms of the priority level of this goal pillar. Some seeing it as absolutely essential. We heard some public comment to that earlier, and others seeing it relative, not that it's not important, but relative to the others, less important. So we might want to talk that through a little bit. More specific items, I think the climate action plan got good reviews and wanting to continue that. I think my sense is you're seeing that has the right mix of outside consultants, internal staff. It's the right plan for sustainability, environmental sustainability. The other one, the next item down, consider infusing sustainability into all city decisions and operations. You can see how that becomes sustainability becomes very essential if you want to infuse it into all city decisions and operations. Just as an example, when there's a project coming on, what's the sustainability impact of that? Is there some way of measuring that? Is there some way of rating the sustainability impact? We talked earlier about recycled water, and Gary mentioned that. That comes under play here too, wanting to expand that. Potential incentives for green proposals, EV charging stations, and consider hiring a sustainability manager, which I think has been done. You have a sustainability manager, so that has now been accomplished. So, first question, do you mean environmental sustainability when you look at this goal and pillar? Councilmember O'Neill.
That's my primary thinking.
Yes.
But also, I mean, there is the behind everything, the economic sustainability and staffing. But so yes, my primary thought was do you just want us to answer, each of us to answer that and then elaborate further?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be good. Yes.
I look at it not just environmental, but sustainability, like small business sustainability.
Okay.
Or, sustaining the quality of life for our residents.
Okay.
Since under here you had additional item. I don't know if that's an additional item.
Oh, that's a brand new item. Yeah,
Okay.
separate from
So,
sustainability.
but like sustaining our small businesses and other things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Yes. Councilmember Hardy?
I too probably take a more broad approach to this. To me, it's more of a mindfulness in everything that we do, and it should be woven throughout. Are the decisions we make, are they going to be sustainable down the road? Are these good decisions? Are these things we're going to look in the rearview mirror and be happy that we did so? I have a little phrase my mother used to say over and over again: use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. And obviously, I remember over and over again. But the idea of are we doing the best with what we have, and are we making good decisions? That's an overall reaching, but I really want to look, because of the sustainability, I'm concerned about the way we now handle our citywide cleanup. So many residents think it's free, but maybe they forgot to look at their bill, and I believe it's $6 we pay a month for that. And it basically, for several weeks, the city, that's the whole focus. We have to pay overtime. We get a bunch of trucks. There's other ways to do that, and I would really like to revisit, because some people are taking a great advantage of that in a good way, and some people it's not necessary, and then we know that it's being not mishandled on our point of view, but people are taking advantage of us as far as illegal dumping, and I worry about things washing down into into our system, and us literally being in trouble with the state as far as the runoff. If it rains during that time or anything gets dumped down there. So into the storm drain situation. So I would like to, from a sustainability, look at our citywide cleanup, and maybe the way we've been doing it is not sustainable, and we need to change that.
Excellent, very good. And if we, and then we can stay on the topic of, is this more narrow around the environment, or does it have broader parameters around it? Councilmember Davis? Just on that question?
Okay, so my people, and I live on the border with San Jose, so yes, the illegal dumping is a real pain, tush. But the people actually like having their pickup done, even though it is on their bill, and they kind of, some people know it is there. I guess I don't know that people didn't know that it was there, that they were paying for it. But we did move, I think that we went to great lengths to move the date of the pickup so that we wouldn't have the rain kind of wash down into the drains and storm drains and whatnot. So, I mean, I look at the broader impact of what's happening with that one thing, because if we tried a long time ago, there was someone that wanted to get rid of cleanup, and I thought the people came in with pitchforks telling us, "Are you crazy? What are you doing? This is like insane." So they like it, but it was also, I think, originally came to the city because of fire hazard. And that to me is more important, and with the raging fires that we have going on and with things that are happening, that to me, with people storing stuff up in their backyard because they don't know how to get rid of it or what to do with it. So that's always been like one of those kind of questions, which way you're going to go on that sustainability. But for me, the most important thing is the water and things of that, things that keep us alive. And, Gary can tell you, I kept harping on him about the water barrels. It says conserve water when it did rain so that people could water their plants and things of that nature. So I kind of look at sustainability in a different...
Yeah, so if more of the natural environment, right? Water, trash, that kind of thing.
Kind of, not a whole little...
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the weeds on some of that stuff because that's their job, not my job. My job is you tell me what you think, or, is it sustainable?
Right.
Let staff tell me that's their job.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, I don't want to pick and choose some little thing. I just think that overarching, we should look at how we're going to stay the city on all levels, every department, and infuse it into every conversation that we have.
Good.
That's all. Okay.
Good. Councilmember Watanabe, on the question of narrow or broad on sustainability.
I think it needs to be broader.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Excellent. Councilmember Chahal.
So I think sustainability is a very broad term. In a way, like its implementation has to be very broad. Ultimately, the residents and the businesses, how we leave this world better than where we are today. Mm-hmm. That's our goal should be. And why I'm saying broader, let me explain why fundamentally it should be broader. It impacts our environment, climate action plan, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, and how they're correlated. Transportation is regularly impacted, but it's directly related to sustainability. And then waste, reducing the waste. It is regular day-to-day event, but it's again related to sustainability. Free shuttles, electric shuttles, that's again sustainability. So there are very broad aspects of how we can leave this world better than where we are. And especially the moment we are in right now, like our teenagers are showing us the path, like a girl like Greta Thunberg and all those girls, and we have to take it very seriously. And it has to be on a very high priority sort of on the city radar. Mm-hmm. And I can, later on during the discussion, I can give you some more details about it.
Excellent, very good.
It should be much broader, and no one aspect, smaller aspect can lead us to our goal of sustainability.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't add on to your question. I mean, I had more that I wanted to say. I just like you're asking me a question. But I did want to add that, I feel like we have a governance committee, and that we utilize that governance committee to establish more policy. The city established policy back in 2016 regarding open space, for instance, and protecting parks and making sure that, we protected whatever we had. But, going forward, I think it's incumbent upon us to focus on, just additionally, garbage, for instance, and water. Come up with policies to protect the city going forward. I mean, because the state is coming down with some mandates, in terms of those issues. And so, we as city leaders, need to step up and create our policies as well, that to have in place to protect the city going forward. And because it just seems like environmental issues change on a daily basis. The world environment is just being changed on a daily basis. So we need to be proactive ourselves as city leaders and putting policy in place as a result.
Good. Excellent. Very good. Yes.
So maybe now we can go back and answer the question, narrow or broad. So I'm not sure what everybody's answers are. Councilmember O'Neill and I would like a star for just answering the question. That was her idea, by the way. Okay. Narrow, broadish.
Yeah, narrow, broadish, and what I heard was a preference for a broader definition. Did I hear that right? Going down the list?
Not sure.
Okay.
I didn't answer broad.
I sort of heard you answer broad.
I did, but he said broad or narrow.
Yeah, and when I say narrow, that means it's really focused on the environment, right? We're focused on climate change and all the implications, residual effects of that. So that would be the focus. As opposed to something that would be broader, we're thinking about workforce sustainability, financial sustainability. The term that I keep hearing get batted around now is resiliency. And so I think that's the broad definition of sustainability. We are resilient across the board in terms of if a recession comes, we'll be resilient. If we get more vacancies, we will be resilient in terms of adapting and responding to that. So that would be a much broader definition of sustainability. I thought I heard the broad approach, but now I'm also hearing that it is about the environment. So help me out here. Help me understand. Broad. Okay. Very clear. Councilmember O'Neill.
So,
Sure, star's going to be taken back.
trying to say though, I think, my primary emphasis was on environmental, but to me, that whole concept of environmental sustainability bleeds through everything.
Absolutely. So to Councilmember Chahill's point, that influences your decisions around transportation, right? Are we promoting bikes? Are we promoting alternative modes of transportation? Because that will help the environment. It will also help traffic, but it'll also help the environment.
Since our sustainability manager is starting in February, we may want to start more narrow in terms of the environment and then expand as we're comfortable with at least that first part of the assignment into more, business sustainability or other types of things. But I would hate to start with such a broad focus when we have to start somewhere and can expand.
Yes.
But it's it's important that we start with the environment and move out into business and other things.
And to that point, all the specific items that you shared with me in the interview were all about the natural environment, right? Charging stations, climate action plan. So the specifics that you gave me all related to the natural environment. So, and most of the items that I'm looking at in the work plan, which we can look at tomorrow, under sustainability are around environment, the natural environment. So how does that sound? Our primary focus is on the natural environment for now, and that does have tentacles, right? That move off in a lot of different areas, a lot of different. Are your buildings energy efficient? Right, as you start getting planning projects coming forward, right? That's also environmental sustainability. So we start there, and then check in next year. The sustainability manager is on. How was progress over the last year? Is there room to expand that out? Is there a need to expand that out? Does that make sense for folks to move forward on that now? Let's talk about specifics. Anything else around dumping, a citywide cleanup, anything around that? Or you want to take in some new items? Yes, Councilmember O'Neill.
So some of my thoughts are like in terms of because I know people around here have heard me talk about trees and things like that. So I mean, to me, I think if you're going to have a sustainability, and particularly the climate action plan, in the past, our first climate action plan relied heavily on Silicon Valley Power to show reductions. And actually, if you look at reports that are coming out now from the state, basically all the reduction in GHG emissions that have happened in California in the last 10 years really come from electric generation. You know, now we're even starting to show again, we're having a slight uptick in GHG production from particularly transportation and other sources. So, you know, we have to go beyond relying on SVP to do the heavy lifting because there's things like, and, you know, I have noticed this and I have a lot of people that talk to me about the numbers of trees that have been cut down in Santa Clara. I mean, we have a requirement for our developers to replace on a 2-to-1, but, you know, we have a lot of people who beg us to cut down their street tree, or the street tree gets diseased and has to be removed and it's not replaced. You know, so like, you know, creating an urban forest again. You know, there's the heat island effect from having a very dark, you know, slurry seal on the streets as opposed to having a lighter seal that's also then more reflective at night for people who are walking and cycling and things like that, so they're more visible. You know, and putting that kind of thinking in place, like, you know, the REACH building codes. So, you know, are we going to, as we build a new city hall, what kind of water heating system are we going to put? You know, it's making I think some bold statements like having more open space, having a big effort to plant more trees, to have more community gardens, some of those things. So I think it's got to be a mixture, but I think that environmental impact, it has to be considered now in almost everything we do. And I think a great place to start is to start reflecting more of some goals that we can enumerate and then measure success towards in the climate action plan and just make that a much more rigorous document.
Excellent, very good. Trees, open space, think boldly, right, about possibilities and opportunities for sustainability. Mayor Gilmore.
I just want to follow up on that to address our success on sustainability. We have to know where we are right now in terms of a baseline for us so that we can measure the success for, you know, have a goal of a certain number of trees or whatever we're going to do. But we have to have some baseline. So I want to make sure that that's important so we can measure that success.
Excellent. And along with the baseline, I don't want to lose track of Councilmember Watanabe's, you don't have a lot of policies around sustainability, and so there would be an opportunity to develop policy around that as well. Okay, other suggestions, comments? Councilmember Chahal?
So some of the things are discussed, but some additional ones, like we can have incentives for converting gas to electric. Those are big ones. And if we can reduce natural gas as much as we can, that is big. Solar, whichever way we can incorporate solar rebates or encouraging solar in our operation. Whether REACH codes is another one, like that's a big one. Planting trees. Councilmember O'Neill talked about cutting down the trees because of one reason, but if we can incentivize or have a really good drive for planting more trees wherever we can.
Excellent.
One. And various type of rebates, electrical vehicle, or we have to explore that, what we can afford, what we cannot, but it doesn't harm us to put it on the table and where we can do EV charging. And to an extent, like I can go to the extent like divesting from companies which are investing in fossil fuels. Like when we reach that goal, that's okay, but we have to put these things on the table. Like, okay, these are, we have to let the public know this is on our radar so that everybody is aware of, they are looking much way ahead of what we are today.
Excellent.
These are things.
Good. Other questions, recommendations, reactions?
Is our sustainability person here? No.
End of month,
Oh, end of month.
end of February.
And so it might be a good idea not to get too far down the road on this until that person comes on so they can get their fingerprints around this and help shape and guide it.
Last one, the bicycle, if we can improve.
Yes.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Okay, so looking at this, and let me suggest that we might come back with some wording on this, because I do think you need a action verb and a sentence there. And I think the big question here was, we're going to focus this on environmental sustainability, at least for this year, and then see where you are next year. And obviously you want to get your sustainability manager into this conversation as well. Lots of great ideas: rebates, trees, open space, incentives, alternative energy, solar, all of that can be part of the mix. Okay, so we have one more item here, and this is an additional item, and I'll let City Manager Santana tee this one up. And so this will be a question from her: to continue to protect the interests of Santa Clara in land use impacts from regional developments such as state legislation, public agencies, settlement agreements. Any background for council before we pose the question?
Just acknowledging the amount of work it takes to monitor the regional projects and respond to the development projects so that we continue to advance Santa Clara's interests, as well as monitor the settlement agreements. That's going to be front and center for 2019. So I wanted to offer it up for the list. 2020, I missed a year.
We have an A and B and a number thing here today. Have another cookie.
Good. And so was the question asked? Are you answering the question for the city manager?
I think we're pretty aware of what they're doing in terms of that.
Yeah.
And all the monitoring.
Good. Excellent. So you're good? Okay, that brings us to the end of what we had planned for today. That was to cover all the strategic goals and pillars and any potential new items that came onto the table. As if you're ready to wrap up, we can wrap up now. If there's something else to put on the agenda for now, we can certainly go in that direction. But to close this segment out, what staff will do is we will put together what we heard today in terms of the specific items that were surfaced, and we'll share those with you tomorrow and ask you which ones do you want staff to go forward with to research, develop, to bring back to you for formal adoption. And so we haven't adopted anything, or you haven't directed staff to do anything. Lots of great ideas, lots of visioning, lots of good brainstorming, but let's bring that back and let's close this out tomorrow. What specifically do you want staff to go do on what items to bring back to you tomorrow for formal adoption, to direct staff to do the research and do the analysis?
So, Dr. Spanos,
Yes.
I'm just a little confused. Are we going to go into new strategic goals pillars, continue, or are we done with that?
Well, if you want to, I have not heard anything that would new go up here.
Oh, I
see. What I did hear was lots of task type, project type suggestions that fit underneath these, but not a brand new goal, not a brand new pillar.
Okay, so maybe I can suggest something. If we could go to the public now and have a public comment, take a 5-minute break, and then come back and just reconvene to see if there's council members that may have some other items that they would like to
Perfect.
move forward to tomorrow's agenda to talk about.
Excellent.
Okay.
And then we can preview tomorrow's agenda again, just so you know what's coming on the docket
Okay.
tomorrow.
I just want to make sure, because I had a list.
Perfect.
I want to make sure everybody has a chance to look at their lists and what they were
Yes.
bringing forward. Okay, so the first public card I have is for Kurt Vartan. Please come forward.
Again, thank you again for having so many opportunities to share. I probably will not be here tomorrow, so I just wanted to put a further plug in to keep as your council priority the small business focus, and I appreciate, especially even talking about in the sustainability, that environmental is the priority. But in terms of small business sustainability, I keep hearing Santa Clara is made up of small business, and I think that's really true. And a way to really embrace that is to find ways to support them in your efforts and initiatives. And you've already really spoken loudly with your funding around the worker cooperative initiative. So I would just encourage you to continue to keep that on your radar. Know that probably later this year, you're going to hear from hopefully the city manager's office saying we have these cool new things that are on the charts, and they're hopefully going to look to be funded, and they'll be really impactful for the city of Santa Clara and really leading the way. This is the center of what's possible, and leading the way with employee ownership, and being really the first city in South Bay to take this on as a priority for small business. I think will send a very loud message to the neighboring cities and the organizations that support that. So I look forward to that. The organizations that are supporting you could not be here today, but they also wanted to say they're very excited to engage. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jan Hintermeister, and then Alex Shore. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Jan Hintermeister with the Board of Library Trustees, although I'm speaking on my own behalf. You've all been very supportive of libraries, and I'd appreciate continuing that. I think about a year ago, we started looking at a little data-driven look at our libraries in terms of trying to maintain levels of service, given that our population of the city is going to increase dramatically as additional areas get built up and out. So I'd like to encourage continuing with that. But beyond that, I really appreciated hearing a little bit of a focus on arts this morning. That to me connects very much with the libraries, which I'm really concerned about, because I look at libraries as one of our most important cultural institutions. But I did hear the idea of at least conceptually, along with an Office of Economic Development, having an Office of Cultural Development, which seems like an excellent idea because we have a lot of cultural activities going on in the city, but sometimes it seems like a lot of the things that we do are not fully appreciated by the entire city and could use some better marketing. So I think that's definitely an idea worth looking into. And I think that's especially true as we look at the city becoming more urbanized. As you become more urbanized, we have to deal with traffic and congestion, which is, part and parcel of having more people. But if you live in a city, there's also all these other amenities that you expect. The things we've heard about, shopping, entertainment, but also the cultural amenities that make cities more livable and provide the advantages that we all appreciate. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, and it'd be nice to kind of see that reflected in the pillars. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex? Sure.
Sorry, Alex Shore with Catalyze SV. Wanted to expand on strategy goal number 5 and a little bit of the conversation we were having earlier about 3 ways cities could do community engagement and build up those resources and skills. I think an umbrella under which all of that is sort of enabled is a community engagement policy. There are cities that have community engagement policies, and there are cities that do not. One of your sister cities wrote a policy in 1999 and hasn't updated it since 2004. So it doesn't even include social media, which you all are active on as council members. So I think if it's something you all are interested in looking at, and I've spoken with one or two members of the council about this is if you're interested in having a community engagement policy to help govern how you talk about development. I think that would be a great addition to what your facilitator, Mr. Spano, summarized today from your comments. And so if that's something you're interested in looking at tomorrow, we, as always, stand ready to, as a nonprofit, provide any technical assistance, advice, throwing spaghetti on a wall and seeing what sticks. So we're here today and a little bit tomorrow as well to chat if there's anything we can contribute further to help you potentially create a community engagement policy around development. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make any comments from the public? Please come forward. Oh, please come forward. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Leader, a resident here in Santa Clara. I've been here for 20 years or so, and one of the things I've noted is that the city doesn't seem to have a very clear transportation policy. They've got pedestrian plans and bicycle plans, but they don't have anything else that kind of integrates everything with the vehicles that are involved as well. And I'm really concerned that that's not even in your priority at this point in time. Maybe it's buried in one of the other items there, but I really think that as the city grows, as somebody else said, urbanization is going to take over. If you don't have a transportation plan, we're going to be stuck with gridlock, which is painful for everybody, bad for sustainability. And anyhow, you need to have that on your priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. And for your information, we added it to going to be adding it to our #1 top goal, which is promote and enhance economic and housing development. And transportation. I think that was our original discussion today. I didn't know if you were in the room when we were talking about it. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping to see it.
It's so important we're putting it #1.
Sorry, since we got into dialogue.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I just.
Sorry. What? No, I'm serious. Because like I said, there is a pedestrian plan, there's
Right.
a bicycle plan, there's not a transportation plan, for goodness sake. And I just had a conversation yesterday with the city staff, and that's the situation. So it's not a surmise on my point, it's reality, which, anyhow, it's late for that.
We agree with you, though, but thank you. Anyone else, please come forward.
Hello. In terms of sustainability, I'm pleased that the council has expressed interest in having the sustainability pillar include economic sustainability, but also focus on environmental sustainability. As you know, the move to VMT is driven by the state's climate goals. Other cities around us, they have sustainability commissions staffed by community members. Sunnyvale Sustainability Commission. Its purpose is the commission advises city council to provide expertise on major policy areas related to the environmental sustainability goals of the Climate Action Plan. In Mountain View, they have an environmental sustainability task force. The objectives of the task force included helping the city meet its climate goals through evaluating whether current city sustainability plans and goals should be modified based on new technologies and processes. Santa Clara has a great opportunity in Silicon Valley Power. Palo Alto also has its own utility, and they have a utility advisory committee. SVP is actually looking at new REACH codes that go beyond California's Title 24. But I hear that they need council direction in order to implement more policies to encourage things like more EV chargers and building decarbonization. Finally, 3 years ago, the 49ers and Chevron funded a makerspace at Santa Clara High School. This facility was supposed to be open to the public, but that has still not happened. There was a company called Tech Shop, which was a public makerspace, but unfortunately they went out of business. I don't understand why the Santa Clara High Makerspace, as well as the Wilcox High Makerspaces, are still not open to the public. Makerspaces are a great way to build community and to prepare our kids for tech careers. I know that almost all the Wilcox robotics students have chosen to study in science and engineering fields. So these are great resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And some of those might be questions for the school district as well, why they haven't opened they haven't started those programs. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jane. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no other public presentations, can we take a 5-minute break and then we'll
Reconvene.
summarize
Yeah, perfect.
from the council? Thank you.
Perfect. For the last segment.
Oh, okay. 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 Okay.
Okay. So we'll do this last segment, which is giving council an opportunity to share any items that you want to put in front of staff for consideration that we haven't talked about so far, and that may not even fit under the current 7 goals and pillars. So it's not that you need to have some, but if you do, let's surface those now. We'll collect that information, and then as I mentioned earlier, tomorrow after the budget presentation, we'll share the list that we heard today, and then we'll ask council, what items do you want staff to go forward, do some research, collect some information, collect some data to bring back to you at a future time. So with that said then, who'd like to get us started? If you have some additional items that you want to put in front of staff to consider. Councilmember Watanabe.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. I know a lot has been shared today, but believe it or not, there are some things that weren't shared. So,
Okay.
and at the same time, I want staff to know how much I know we all do, but when I say this, I mean it. That we really appreciate them just hearing what we have to say right now, share but at the same time, be realistic and what is achievable and what's not achievable, and because at the same, like Councilmember Davis said earlier this morning, we don't want to come up with 20 items and then nothing gets done. So, but anyway, like I said earlier, I went out and met with residents to hear specifically, what's on their minds, and because we are the voice of the public. So, in terms of, last year the North Side had some great goal-setting items achieved and are still being worked on. One item that wasn't mentioned was the new bathroom at the Fairway Glen Park, and I reached out to Director Moback, and I understand construction will be starting on that in 2021. But yeah, he's back there. Yeah. Yes. But considering other issues that we have going on up north in North Santa Clara, I know we were talking about the stadium earlier in Measure J and management of Levi Stadium and the impact to the community, and I have brought this issue up before and would like to continue to follow up on it, and that regards permit parking in North Santa Clara. And when I discussed this item with residents, one of them actually talked about extending the red sticker program that's currently in place. Are you listening over there? And as a potential option, because I know permit parking, we've been kicking it around for a while, but when the resident brought this up about extending the red sticker the red sticker program, and this was the red stickers were created for certain neighborhoods, like say in Fairway Glen and Cheney Street in that area, but extending it to include like the Rivermark area as a way to get something in place. Street racing resolution. I know this is something that the city will be bringing back to the council on February 25th, which I look forward to hearing, but it's an issue that's very important to residents and a goal that we'd like to see achieved, if possible, this year in terms of having an ordinance or resolution put in place. We talked about the overnight and RV parking on the public streets, re-implementing the neighborhood watch programs and the neighborhood noise issues. some things that we haven't addressed today, but per se here on the council, but was addressed earlier by Josue Garcia, is the wage theft ordinance and the responsible construction ordinance, and which also includes prevailing wage. I have actually talked to the city manager about this previously after meeting with Ruth Silvertop and WeTran regarding prevailing wage and the concerns that were raised as a result of what was uncovered with contracts involving the stadium and payment procurement policies and payments. So this is definitely an important ordinance that would benefit our city in a lot of different ways, and appreciate Josue Garcia dropping off the materials that we could use to go forward and see what we can do in terms of putting in a policy in place. We also, there's been a lot of discussion about a bus shuttle and to benefit seniors around the city, and I appreciate, that the staff has, stressed, what would be necessary to do something like that, and the time investment in terms of staff and money. And so if we can look for, at a feasibility study to see about what would be in place, I think that's a great starting point, and how to be realistic about that request. In terms of, there was another issue, internship funding. We had put money aside, and if I'd like to see if we can, or I'd like to see follow up on that this year somehow. Again, realistically, what can be done? How? Because it's something that could benefit a lot of youngsters, and I think that's about it, City Manager.
I want to acknowledge that one's on me. I literally have in my email a policy for the internships. And so we're getting ready to roll that out this fiscal year.
Wonderful. Okay, that's very good news. Okay. And I think that's all I have. Thank you very much. Do I need to do anything else? Say anything
Very
else?
good. Excellent.
Okay.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes. I keep getting in trouble for this. I don't know. One of my priorities, and it happened a long time ago, I was working with the Councilmember Mahan, and we had the task of consolidating the IEC Commission into the Cultural Commission. At that time, it seemed like a good idea, and now I'm rescinding. I want it reinstated. It has created a void for us in that the Cultural Commission has other things that they have going on. But the IEC, was a very productive commission for us. It helped us with any sister city that was coming or a new sister city. And it was a kind of, we have the council, then we have the commissions and boards. So they played a vital role. And I really believe that since that's happened, that I would love to reinstate that commission to alleviate some of the communication issues that we are having. It also would give 7 more people a chance to give their service to our city. And I believe that we might have some people on staff right now that could handle that job. I don't know if we could reallocate them to that. And the each MOU demonstrated the need to have that happen, to have that International Exchange Commission work with the council. So I really would like respectfully consideration. Just please, could we look at this one? I know that I don't know how that's going to land on my city manager, but there we are. My biggest concern is having Related come out of the ground. That is my top #1 priority right now. That is a revenue stream to us. We've had delays on this. I think that we need to be a little bit more diligent in how we can realign maybe some resources or something to just figure out how that is going to happen. Communications is always a big thing of mine. I know that we have people that will be talking to us tomorrow, but my big concern all the time is tell the Santa Clara story because of what's happening out there and the perception that is out there. I need to stop the negative and get with the positive here. I think that there's a lot of ways we can do that with community partners and establishing good relationships with our media partners also. The capacity studies, I know we kind of talk about that, but that's very important because I don't know if we could redistribute resources and take care of things like that. Another one of my priorities is the downtown revitalization. I know that our Silicon Valley Power guy is also our downtown revitalization guy. Some of our staff wear many hats, but I would like to see a timeline on deliverables and, some kind of priority that works within that community, District 5, because we do not have a representative in there anymore. Legislation is near and dear to my heart. There are things that are coming at us at all different impacts. I know that some of that stuff will come to us, but I don't know if we can designate a person to work on legislation. It affects every person that we have in our city and things that we don't know about, but then the communication to our constituents as to what could and possibly happen to them. I'm supporting Kathy with this construction ordinance. I had a chance to talk to the city attorney about this, and he thought this would be a really good place to have the conversation. Absolutely. And I think I capped everything that I have on my little list. Thank you.
Councilmember Hardy, and then we'll go to Councilmember O'Neill.
Vice Mayor Hardy.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Hardy. I've been calling you Councilmember all day.
I'm not hung up on it. I just have two. First off, Machado Park is the only park in District 3, and it has been in construction for quite a while. I'm getting really, really nasty emails from people saying when. And I'm wondering if I know there's been some problems with it. I'm wondering if we could put up some kind of a sign in the park when people come up and see it closed and want to know when it's going to be open. And I even talked with the police department just when we do have the opening ceremony. We've wanted to get out the word over public safety and some of our behaviors that I think those kind of ceremonies are also an opportunity to share that message. I would like to also relook at our sign ordinances for our businesses, because in the past we have said no phone numbers, no websites or anything like that. And when we talk about wanting to support our businesses and especially our mom and pop small businesses, I think we need to look at that sign ordinance and see if it needs to be updated.
I'd like to invite Craig up just to comment on Machado, because I have seen a lot of emails as well, and I think it would be helpful.
Councilmember O'Neill. Very good.
Yep, thank you, Craig Mobeck, Director of Public Works. Yes, as City Manager mentioned, there was some construction issues with Machado Park. During it, there was some unforeseen conditions, but also there was some issues that came up that the contractor found when he was building. And frankly, our design engineer that the city hires to perform the design had to go back and reconfigure some of the design. That did put a pause on things, and because of that, then we got into the wet weather, and we had to then, once we got the design, work with our contractor to, finalize a solution and agree upon a price. So we're pretty much there in doing that, and we're finalizing some paperwork, and now we're working with the contractor to get him back out on the site to finish the job. So the remaining work is probably what we're estimating right now, and they said they can complete it with 12 weeks, but it's just getting that start date, getting them back, getting the site dried out. So that is what we've been working with. We've been working with parks, and we've talked about even today about how we go about messaging that, because there has been a few emails about it. So, yeah.
Okay, so a couple of quick things. So we did talk about services and things like that. I think if we could look at this year, how can we expand senior services, and specifically, most immediately to expand hours at the senior center, since that seems to be, it's a heavily used facility, and I guess longer term, as I said, we have to develop a plan for as we have an increasingly aging population. But at least to show a commitment to us being an age-friendly city, if we could see what we can do to get extra hours for the senior center. I think that would be one of the things I'd be wishing to promote. And the second thing, to kind of piggyback on, we had encouraged Alex to come and from Catalyze SV to talk about community engagement. And I mentioned some things about using other forms of technology. So I would like to see us pursue that and perhaps look at, either working with Catalyze SV or involving them in the process. And it kind of piggybacks, because last year, one of the things that I brought up, they didn't really make it, because we had kind of an altered process last year, didn't really make it onto the list, was having a community benefits policy for, all the projects that are going on, particularly developer projects. And so I kind of think that those kind of dovetail, because if we have the right kind of engagement going on, we'll understand what people want back, what they want from development projects. And then at some point, perhaps with the idea with a policy, and I believe our city manager has experience with this from other jurisdictions, that you can almost like set a baseline instead of like renegotiating every time or doing the negotiation from the dais, which sometimes happens, whether it's the planning commission or the city council, that that will be, once again, it kind of fits into my having people know what's expected and all that. But I think that can all be, some of that can be fleshed out as part of a larger commitment to community engagement, which I think we've come a long way. And I see what some of the various developers and what the city is going through in terms of using all the methodologies that we have, the means, but perhaps we could formalize that and have a specific engagement process.
Excellent. Next, council member.
Thank you. So, going back to, I would say we should prioritize exploring the business tax. I already mentioned that, and the shuttle program. And on top of that, we need to have a body which can talk to our businesses for community benefits, ongoing community benefits, so that can be the body which can explore these options down the line. And there are issues with the resident parking permits. Some of them complained, why we have to pay for our parking only on our own streets. So we may need to look at that wherever it is. And wherever we have this permitting, residents also complained about enforcement of the parking. Like they have a 1 hour parking between some hours. So they are lacking some enforcement on that. That should be looked into this. And tenant protection for the rent. Like if we can look at something, rents are being arbitrarily increased a lot in some areas. If we can look at what city can do in addition to the SB 1482, that would be nice. If you can put some information in the domain, that would be nice. Coming back to sustainability, I would like to say that if just to jumpstart, if we want to look at Mountain View has done a great job on, they have a SAP, Sustainability Action Plan, I think, and they have allocated like for 3 years, everything funded, almost $7.2 million on that program. And they have laid out details of that, so I would recommend staff to look at that for our new sustainability manager to look at that. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. Yes, Mayor Gilmore.
Okay, thank you. I know there's been a lot of good things mentioned already in addition to what we've already done, but for me, I think the most important project we have is the related project for many reasons. One, the shopping, the housing, the entertainment, the restaurant, but above everything else is the flow of millions of dollars into our general fund so we can do all of these projects. And I know we're going to have a presentation on that tomorrow, so I don't want to belabor that at all. But just some of the things that, and I know we're going to be funding some of these things, but I didn't want to lose sight of them, even though maybe they've already been talked about. One is the worker co-ops and the employee ownership, the small business focus and the small business initiative. I think that's really important, and it just shows us as leaders in this type of support of our small businesses, because I don't see that we're putting a lot of effort, not because we just haven't been able to, and I'd like to start, really supporting our small businesses because they're having such a difficult time in this economy, and, all the conditions we're throwing on them and the government's throwing on them, and just to get them to survive, because that's the fabric of Santa Clara. So the small business focus, we're going to start with, $100,000, and we're going to do this, but I see it growing in the future. The second thing Councilmember Watanabe already brought up was the responsible construction ordinance and the wage theft, since that is hitting us in Santa Clara, and not just the stadium, but in other areas. I was submitted given a document that of all the different wage theft issues from different companies in Santa Clara, and it was so many more companies than I even imagined. So I think that's important to support that and get that forward. Third, Catalyze SV, the community engagement policy. We're going to talk a lot about communications in other areas, but in terms of what I've seen Catalyze SV do as a nonprofit is they do a really good job and have some really good best practices for engaging the community, especially on development projects. Because I've seen on development projects, the important thing is communication and engaging the residents, especially the residents affected in an area. And there's so much difference between when they're not engaged and when they are engaged. And last Tuesday, we had an example of the community being engaged and supportive of our affordable housing project on San Tomas and Monroe Street. And it makes a huge difference. So I'd like to partner with Catalyze SV in different ways, but Councilmember O'Neill already brought that up. The public arts fee, placemaking, I know we put that already into one of our existing goals. Communications, we're going to hear about tomorrow. Clean elections, enforcing our ordinances, which is important, and I know the city clerk is working on that. Extended hours on the senior center, I support Councilmember O'Neill's proposal on that. Capacity study, that's already in. Our bond parcel tax, infrastructure, revenue opportunities, city manager, you're going to be discussing that. Is that tomorrow?
February 11th.
February 11th?
We'll talk about capital budget and
Is
projects.
that part of the discussion tomorrow?
It will come up.
Okay, all right, very good. IT enhancements for like cybersecurity. We need to talk about that. That's really important. We talked about it last year, but I haven't seen much done yet on that. But that is really important. And enhancing community safety and other things through technology, I think, is really important. And investing in infrastructure of technology now could help us with community policing and other ways of doing things. We need to explore that. And I don't know where that ends up in any of these things, or if it ends up being its separate item. But for the most part, we need to invest in technology. And then continuing to weigh in on development along our borders and all the threats to Santa Clara in so many ways from many different angles. I think we're doing that, and I think that's it I have for now.
Okay, very good. So anything else from council on these items? Yes.
Mine were more or less community issues that people kind of said, hey, you have goal setting, can you bring these little items up? And they're small, but they are heartfelt from the people that made them. One was a resident that lives in District 5 who said that he's experiencing people coming from apartments, parking in front of his house, leaving the car there, and then coming over the weekend to pick up the car, and then he has a problem putting his trash out. So he's concerned about that. He wants us to look at illegal fireworks that seem to happen not only on 4th of July, but when the playoffs happened with the 49ers, somebody behind him was blowing up firecrackers or whatever was going out there, and he was concerned about fire safety because he has an ADA person in his home that he felt if the house went on fire, what was he going to do and how was he going to deal with that? So that was a little bit of because what's happening in our state alone. Another one the chief of police isn't going to like, but they want to eliminate the chief of police and redo a charter amendment because they felt that this year became way too political, and the amount of potential candidates living in the city of Santa Clara was a hindrance to what was going on. The timing, I think I brought that up, timing of the traffic lights during the day for people to get around, continuing the communications with our downtown revitalization. They feel that they need to have that ongoing all the time. I think we do that, but they want more. And Jack, you just met, who was just here, said to me, please put this in here. He was not here for the number one item about adding the transit. He wants us to be a little bit more cognizant of enforcing the ordinances that are already here about traffic and transit. He wants us to be a little bit more diligent with that, and that was his request. So these were just things that came from individual, residents of our city. So I just wanted to put that into the record.
Okay, anything else from council? Okay, so let's move towards wrap up for the day. And so as I mentioned, tomorrow there are different segments. It's going to be a little bit more nuts and bolts. It's a little more free flowing today. We'll start off tomorrow with just any recap or thoughts, overnight thoughts about today. We'll move into a budget presentation from your finance director, and then we will at that point, we will present to you what we heard today and ask you which items do you want to direct staff to come back after doing some research, data collection, and analysis. What are those items? There's lots of items, so we're going to have to wade through all of those, but we'll sort that all out. Then we'll move into the discussion of communications with the two firms, Circle Point and Threefold and Circle Point, and then we'll deal with check-in on the work plan, council referrals, and other referrals. If you have questions, there's no staff presentation, so if you want to take a look at that in your packet, any questions you have about that, tomorrow afternoon or late morning is the time to raise those. And then I know related project just came up a couple times here in this discussion, come up many times today. So as the mayor said, there'll be a brief presentation on related project, opportunity for you to ask questions, have discussion, and if there's any other major projects in the queue that you want to talk about, we can talk about them at that time. So we are starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. and we will have some breakfast type food here at 8:30. Great day. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you.